All right, here are solutions for quiz 1 for Math 243. Let's see, in this first problem, I use my chalkometer to determine the average sugar content in 4,949 randomly chosen 8-ounce bars of Stone Lake dark chocolate. And we find the average bar to be 49% sugar. So using that information, we can figure out what the sample is and what the population is. So remember, the population is kind of the bigger group, a group that's so big that you can't measure it directly, but we want to draw conclusions about it. Whereas the sample is a subset of that group, a smaller group that we actually get information from. So in this case, the sample would be these 4,949 bars. So maybe the 4,049 randomly chosen. Actually, I guess you can leave that. I'll leave that out. You can write it in there, but just so my answers don't look too specific. The 4,949 8-ounce dark chocolate bars of Stone Lake dark chocolate. Whereas the population would be all of the 8-ounce bars of Stone Lake dark chocolate. So presumably this company made lots of bars of chocolate, millions, who knows, so many that we can't measure the sugar content in all of them. So this is our sample from this population. All right, moving on. The research objective. What the research objective is the question that's being asked or posed in this study. It doesn't say it specifically here, but later on we mention kind of what we figured out from this information. So we can kind of work backwards and figure out that our research objective, our question was maybe to find out what percent sugar I'll circle that from the population. To find out what percent sugar all 8-ounce Stone Lake dark chocolate, blah, blah, blah. To find out what percent sugar all 8-ounce Stone Lake dark chocolate bars are. Good enough? All right, moving on. What are the descriptive statistics? So descriptive statistics are kind of how you organize and summarize the data, the sample data. So from our sample, we got 4,949 chocolate bars, and you can kind of picture our raw data was this huge list of 4,949 observations, and each observation was what percent sugar that specific bar was. So this descriptive statistics were maybe calculating that the average bar in our sample, which is important, this is sample, calculating the average bar in our sample is 49% sugar. Or something like that. You can word it a little bit differently as long as you get that idea across. But what's important is that we're talking about the sample here in part D. Then moving on to part E, what is a reasonable conclusion? We could conclude that an average 8-ounce Stone Lake dark chocolate Stone Lake dark chocolate bar, maybe from the population or in the population, population, we can conclude that an average 8-ounce Stone Lake dark chocolate bar is about 49% sugar. Something like that. But important, population, sample, population for these three parts here. All right, part two, a little bit quicker because a lot less writing for me. We're just supposed to figure out, we have all these different data types, and we want to know if they're quantitative or qualitative. So remember, quantitative here, you're thinking numbers, but it's not just numbers where an average would make sense. Whereas qualitative, you're kind of thinking categories. I don't know where to put that, way down here maybe. Categories or qualities, I guess. So we go through these and we got to figure out which is which. The sugar content in a chocolate bar, kind of referring to our first example, that would be quantitative. Because it's a numerical value and we can average it. Actually, we did average it in part one. The fuel economy of a Subaru Forester, that's also quantitative. I think that's an example we did in class where we figured out fuel economy for a bunch of different cars and then we averaged those out. So average makes sense, it's quantitative. Good lookingness of babies, where the babies are classified as either ugly, average, or stunning. So that second part is really important. I think this, you'll see in part C and part E we can get different answers here. But in part C, it would have to be qualitative because we're specifying that each baby fits into one of these three categories. So it's qualitative. You can't take averages here because they're not numbers. Zip code, tricky one. Qualitative. Kind of expect that one to be quantitative because they are numbers, but the average of those numbers don't make any sense. They don't have any meaning. What's the average of somebody that lives in 94552 and 93701? You can't average zip codes and get any meaning. So actually zip codes are qualities, or they're categories that people belong in. And then finally, good lookingness of babies where they're ranked on a scale of 1 to 10. Now it's quantitative, because each baby gets a numerical value. We could average those out. We could say the average baby in this group was a 7.4 in terms of looks or whatever. So quantitative here, qualitative up here. That is the end of the quiz.